All right, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started with our lunchtime keynote speaker. I hope everyone's found something that is nourishing and enjoyable for you to eat. Again, my name is Gray Norton. I'm a senior clinical fellow here at the Harvard Law School Food Law and Policy Clinic. Thank you. And I'm just so glad that y'all are here, and it's been so fun getting to know you over the last kind of almost a full day, but just kind of seeing what you're interested in, or learning what you're interested in, and just seeing your brilliance has been really inspiring. As we kind of heard from our first panel, I echo all their sentiments as well. This is a really important event to me. I actually attended as a student, and it made a real big impact on me and my career, so I'm very excited to be able to share that with y'all. So I have got the great pleasure at this time to introduce our lunchtime keynote speaker, Ashley Randle. So Ashley Randle currently serves as the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. She previously served as Deputy Commissioner, where she oversaw legislative and policy affairs. Before that, Ashley was the Member Services Director for Northeast Dairy Producers Association and the Marketing Specialist and Special Projects at the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. She graduated from Cornell University with a Bachelor of Science in Applied Economics and Management and Animal Science, and she received her JD from Western New England University School of Law. She currently serves as a trustee to the Massachusetts 4-H Foundation Board and was named to the Worcester Business Journal's 40 Under 40 class in 2022. Ashley was born and raised on her family's 5th-generation dairy farm in South Deerfield and resides in Sterling, Massachusetts with her husband. So let's give a round of applause to Ashley and welcome her to the summit.
Well, good afternoon. It's really an honor to be here with all of you today, current leaders in food and ag law, and just such a privilege to have the opportunity to speak with all of you. As Gray mentioned, I was born on my family's 5th-generation dairy farm in South Deerfield, Massachusetts, in the western part of the state, and I grew up showing Guernsey and Holstein cattle at local county fairs as well as state fairs and ultimately on the national level. I was an avid member of my local 4-H club. Do we have any 4-H alumni? Great to see. FFA as well. Great to see. 4-H really played a critical role in my career journey and in my development as a leader in agriculture. And you'll hear that theme throughout today. Much of where I am today is because of those individuals that I met through the 4-H program and the impact that they had on my life, as well as the skills that I gained from being in 4-H, from responsibility to time management to a strong work ethic. And certainly, as you can see at a young age, I was also a trendsetter with the denim tuxedo. So I've tried to carry that throughout my career as well. And as I grew up in the 4-H program, one of the things that really stood out to me was how could I continue to make an impact after I aged out of the 4-H program? How could I stay involved in agriculture? And when I was attending a fair when I was 12 or 13 years old, I heard the term agricultural attorney. And I thought, wow, this is great. I can combine my interest in agriculture and my love of arguing into a career path. And my parents said, well, it sounds like a great opportunity. And I really focused on that throughout high school. And so going to college, as Gray noted, I attended Cornell University. And I wanted to focus on both business and animal science to have the background to then be able to go on to law school. And my time in law school was really pivotal because I could take classes around environmental law as well as sustainability law, and that really showed me the different opportunities to not only be in the courtroom, but to also pursue a career in public service. And I was very fortunate as I was taking the bar exam to have the opportunity, before I had even passed the bar, I had a job offer to go to the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. And I know you all heard from Senator Craig Hickman from Maine last evening, certainly a leader in Maine agriculture. And it was a very unique opportunity to build out a sustainable recognition program for farms and understand what the challenges were, as well as the opportunities for the farming sector. So I worked in Maine for 3 years, and then I went to New York for a short time period to work on policy work around labor, as well as concentrated animal feeding operations and environmental issues with dairy farmers across the Northeast. And then in 2018, I had the opportunity to come back to Massachusetts and work at the Department of Agricultural Resources as the Legislative and Policy Director. And that was something that was very attractive to me because I knew I could work with farmers directly and have the opportunity to influence policy at the state level and also across the region. So that was a really great opportunity and felt very fortunate to be appointed as commissioner then in 2023. And this was an incredible opportunity as I was the first female commissioner appointed in Massachusetts. Our department is over 100 years old. So for me, it was, thank you. For me, it was quite an honor and also a privilege to be able to lead others at the state level and to work with our team at the department. We have just over 120 employees at the department, and also work with farmers across the state. And it's a privilege that I don't take lightly, because certainly for anyone in food and law, we see, food and ag law, we see the challenges that farmers face, and now more than ever. And so to be able to help farmers on a daily basis is really what drives me in my role. And at the department, as you can see, our mission, when I came into the department in 2018, at that time, our mission was over 10 years old. And so in 2023, when I was appointed commissioner, the first thing we did in that first month was change our mission to make sure that it more accurately reflected agriculture in Massachusetts. So as of now, our mission is to cultivate a robust and equitable agricultural economy, promote a safe and resilient food system, and preserve a healthy environment for Massachusetts farmers, animals, and consumers. And our work at the department is as diverse as the farmers that we have across the state. So we have over 7,000 farms in Massachusetts, and you've seen cranberries now in a few images. That is our largest food crop that we produce in the state. Our biggest industry is nursery and greenhouse. We have just over 1,000 businesses in the nursery and greenhouse sector, but cranberries are our largest food crop. When you look then at the agricultural economy in the state, dairy would be right up there. We have 95 dairy farms in the state, very diversified operations, but an important part of our agricultural economy. And when we look at the areas of focus, and certainly what's top of mind now, is farmland protection. So we have a program at the department called the Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program. And what that does is it protects the land in perpetuity from development. So it will always be in agriculture. And through that program, we've protected nearly 80,000 acres and almost 1,000 farms. We know through American Farmland Trust, their report of how much land we could lose by 2040, that we risk losing 74,000 acres. So in 15 years, we could lose just as much as we've protected. So we're very mindful of that and how we can work with more farms to be able to protect their land for the next generation. Grants are also a major part of what we do at the department, assisting farms with infrastructure investments, helping new and beginning farmers invest in their businesses or with land access. Also food safety. Many of you are probably familiar with the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. Our department works as co-regulators with FDA, and we have a cooperative agreement with them. So we have a whole division built around food safety. Animal health is also a major area of our focus, with new developing concerns such as New World screwworm. We've seen HPAI or bird flu in the news in recent years. We're very mindful of biosecurity practices. So we were actually the first state in the country last July to institute mandatory testing of our dairy farms. And we've been testing our dairy farms on a monthly basis to ensure that they have that high biosecurity maintained. Market access and promotion is another area that we really focus on. We have our Mass Grown and Fresher brand, so when consumers are in the grocery store or buying products from a farm stand, they know this is Massachusetts made or produced. And then food security. Last October, so just a year ago, we launched a division of food security at our department, and that's become a primary focus, and I'll talk more about this in a little bit, but certainly with federal impacts around the SNAP program, our food security team has really been critical in looking at how we can be proactive to address some of those concerns. And this may resonate with many of you about what farmers need to be able to be successful and viable. So many times we talk about sustainability of our farming operations, but viability is really key now as well, and the resiliency of our sector. Weather, we've had major weather events the past few years in Massachusetts. In 2023, we had a February 4th freeze, a May 18th frost event, and flooding that devastated hundreds of acres that year. Last year we had a drought. This year, most of the country is in a drought. And for farmers, it becomes increasingly more challenging to deal with those weather challenges. Market access. We know trade is an important part of that, and that's certainly for both our dairy sector as well as our cranberry sector, and also seafood, been a major concern. Policy and research. The policy side, and so what many of you will work on in the future, is becoming more and more difficult as we see changing regulations and how that impacts, and changing policies, how that impacts the farming community. And then the education and technical assistance really go hand in hand, working with our university extension programs and the need for that to continue. So when we look at some of the federal impacts, and I'll highlight a few of those, food security is top of mind right now in our state. We know that based on the current error rate, we will need at the state level to cover $440 million to make up that gap. So what we launched in July was an anti-hunger task force, and I'm serving as one of 3 co-chairs on that task force to look at how we can reduce the error rate, how we can support on the SNAP education and outreach side, and how we can assist our most vulnerable citizens in the state that will potentially be impacted by these devastating cuts. We also, earlier this year, many of you have heard of probably of the Local Food Purchase Assistance Cooperative Agreement Program and Local Food for Schools. These were incredible programs to get more local food into both food pantries, food banks, as well as our school system. And we lost $6 million in funding through the LFPA and $12 million through the Local Food for Schools program. So we know we can't fill in all of these funding gaps, so we're trying to think of creative solutions for how we can use existing funding to fill in some of those gaps. And then the Emergency Food Assistance Program, we lost about $3.5 million through that program. In Massachusetts, we have MEFAP, or the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program, and the legislature this year actually increased the funding to be able to cover that $3.5 million gap. So we have over $50 million now going to food banks, and a portion of that is locally grown products. As I mentioned, farmland protection is one of our major focus areas at the department, and as you've probably heard, the Natural Resources Conservation Service had several employees through either the early retirement program or other initiatives that were cut. And at our office, we saw a 50% reduction in staffing. So individuals that were on the list to get technical assistance now have been taken off the list because the wait was going to be over 2, in some cases 3 years, to be able to get that assistance. The Regional Conservation Partnership Program, we had been awarded funding the end of last year, set to sign the contract, and we would have gotten $20 million through that program at the state level to be able to work on partnerships with other entities. It was a great example of public-private partnership with land trusts and the state to be able to protect more land across the state. And then a lot of our funding actually for our land protection program is in conjunction with NRCS. It's called the ASIP AIL program, and that's been a way that we've been able to protect more land at the state level, and we also are unclear what that funding will look like going forward. And then climate change. We aren't sure where the policies will shift around climate change. And certainly, as we've seen the weather impacts and how the weather is changing and the climate is changing, we know that farmers are really focused on mitigation as well as adaptation, and that plays to their overall resiliency. So to see where climate change policies go over the next few years is something that our farmers are really paying attention to, but that we're committed to maintaining at the state level in all of our programs on that front. Energy is another area at the department. We have what we call a dual-use solar program. Some of you may have this in your state as well, where crops can be grown under solar panels or livestock can be grazed. We actually, at the University of Massachusetts, their extension program, they had the first site in the country to do research around what crops would be viable, what livestock you could graze, the height of the panels. And we have almost 20 projects that are online now, and we're starting to see the impacts and the viability of those crops under solar panels. And we know that across the state, we had farmers that were benefiting from the Rural Energy for America program, and their funding was cut. So we've been trying to fill in some of those gaps at the state level as they had already started their projects. And as I mentioned earlier, trade and market access is another deep concern for our farming community. Working with our commodity associations, as well as, for instance, in the dairy industry, the cooperatives, to be able to figure out where market access is going and what that's going to look like over the next year or two. I know I was in Arkansas a few weeks ago, and there's been videos of Arkansas farmers talking, about soybeans and where are the soybeans going to go because the harvest is taking place right now. So that's something we're especially mindful of because many of our cranberries are exported through ocean spray, especially to Europe and countries right over the pond. So there's a lot of concern there what that market's going to look like. And our cranberry harvest is taking place right now. We also know that with the inputs, there's a lot of concern around fertilizer, and we've seen that in the news. And then inputs such as the steel. We hear from breweries and our local farmstead breweries about the cost of the cans and how much that has increased. And so we're really mindful of what those impacts are. And again, knowing we can't influence all of the policies on that front, but we do work as a region through our Northeast Association of State Departments of Agriculture and NASDA, which is our national organization, to really advocate for positive changes for farmers and to make sure that we are communicating to USDA what the impacts are when markets are cut for various commodities and our farmers. And then labor. This one is something that we see in the news. I've worked with farms over the last several months that unfortunately have had workers that have been impacted, and we all want to have a stable and legal workforce, but there is not a system that currently allows for that or that is working effectively enough, especially when we look at some of our livestock industries and farms. They do not have a program that allows for 365-day labor. And that creates a lot of concern and also challenges for our livestock sector. And so to be able to have consistent immigration policies, that is something that we will continue to advocate for going forward for the next several years. And then going back to the market access piece and really looking at some of those programs that have been really effective for our states and as a region, the regional food business centers, which align with the Resilient Food System Infrastructure grants, those really looked at the middle of the supply chain. So I'm sure in many of your states, distribution and processing create challenges because there's not enough of it typically for the farming community. So we've been able to leverage these grants through USDA to be able to help fill in some of those gaps. But we know those funding programs are no longer continuing after this year. So we have to try to figure out what a new iteration of those programs could look like, working with Congress to file legislation, as well as potentially at the state level, developing our own programs. And then the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, that was specifically focused on the dairy industry, and that was a way to help with branding, marketing, and promotion for dairy products or diversification. And then the regional issues. We recently have heard and seen in the news about the USDA reorganization plan, which would move USDA, many of their staff out of the DC area to 5 office locations around the country. Our closest location would be in North Carolina. So as a Northeast region, that's very concerning to us in terms of access and assistance for our farms. We also know that many of the cooperative agreements that we have either been terminated or there's been a reduction in funding, and that creates greater strain on our state departments of agriculture and our ability to maintain our staff. And when we look at supporting farmers through state action, as I said, consistency is really the name of the game. Consistency in policies, consistency in funding, so that farmers can continue to farm and we can be there to support them. So we need those consistent policy action items to continue to go forward. Also, the public education piece. Consumers continue to get more and more disconnected from the local food system. We know about 2% of the population is connected to agriculture now. So I really feel that it's our responsibility to continue to educate the population about agriculture and how we produce the food that we do. I will always say that partnerships are incredibly powerful and more important than ever. And as a region, we continue to partner as state departments of agriculture, as our legislative delegations, and as our governors continue to partner to be able to figure out how we can work together to support agriculture. The Farm Bill, every year we continue to say it's a Farm Bill year, and we've been saying that for 3 years. And it doesn't look like by the end of this year we will have a Farm Bill. But that is incredibly important because much of the funding that was authorized through the Farm Bill has expired. One example is our mental health program at the department. We established that through funding through the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. And without a new Farm Bill, we have been prioritizing it in our department funding, but we know that it's not a sustainable solution long term. And many farmers we hear from are asking for more mental health support, and we're very mindful of that. So we want to make sure that as we're advocating for a Farm Bill, that is prioritized. And then planning. We've tried to plan as much as we can, but as we know, things change on a daily basis. So at the state level, we have plans around farmland protection and what our goals are for 2030, 2040, as well as our local food action plan. And again, that has timelines that we can continue to work towards. And then our Resilient Lands Initiative, which again focuses on land access and protection. And after all of that sobering news, I thought I would end on a high note and just offer, as a former law student in your shoes and an individual in the policy field, some of the things that have really helped me throughout my career. And one of those is field work. So oftentimes we will say that we're going out into the field to help farmers or to meet with farmers or industry members. And I think that's incredibly important, whether you're working with a client or a colleague, to really understand where they're coming from and to be able to meet them at that level to see firsthand what the impacts are. And most of the time, I learn the most about an issue when I visit a farm. I can see firsthand what's happening and then develop a policy solution or a response. And I think that's incredibly important to continue to get out of the office and to see firsthand what's happening on the ground. Finding ways to get to yes. So many times it's easy to say, or easier to say, no, we can't do that. It can't be done. There is always a way to get to yes, almost always. And I think it's important to always strive for that when you're working with your colleagues or on behalf of a client. Internships. I'm sure many of you throughout college did internships, and now in law school doing externships and having those opportunities. For me, it was really an opportunity to see what I did enjoy and what I didn't enjoy. And so I think it's a great opportunity to always take advantage of those and do something that gets you out of your comfort zone, even if it's not your ultimate career path. Service mentality. So throughout law school, I worked as a waitress at a historic hotel. And that was one of the most pivotal jobs I had in my career. It really aligned with the service mentality that I had established through 4-H and developed, and then being able to work as a waitress, always trying to make it a good experience for people, not knowing what their day has looked like. This could be the highlight of their day, or it could be the only opportunity all year they have to spend with their family. And I remember on Christmas Eve, it was my 2L year, so I was going to be looking for an internship the following summer. And I had a table of a brother and sister. They were out for their Christmas Eve dinner. They had lost their parents a few years earlier, but they always did Christmas Eve dinner together. And she worked at the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources as an attorney. We got to talking, and by the end of dinner, she had offered me an interview. I interviewed a few weeks later, and I ended up in Vermont the following summer and worked at the agency and absolutely loved working in state government. And so that helped influence my career role as well. But having that service mentality and taking the time to get to understand others, where they're coming from, and to make sure that it's always a good experience or how you can help them, I think is incredibly important. Mentors. At this point, I'm sure many of you have professors or family that are mentors. Continue to find those mentors that you really look up to and admire. For me, it's individuals from the dairy world that I've met through showing cattle, my professors that I continue to stay in touch with from law school, and my predecessor at the department who really continued to advocate for me as a young female in agriculture and was always there to support me in advancing to the commissioner role. Embracing diversity. I think that a diverse range of opinions and experiences and interests only makes us stronger and better as a community, and especially in agriculture and food and ag law. it is a smaller community, and the more that we acknowledge the difference of opinions and ideas, it will only make us better in the future. Empowering others. And this is something I talk a lot about at the department, our culture. I want to make sure that every time I'm talking to a member of our team, that they always feel heard and respected and a part of the conversation and ultimately the decision that we're getting to. And the culture of inclusivity that we have at the department means helping others up the leadership ladder. And in my time at the department now, 7 years, we've been able to elevate people to higher roles, and I want to continue to be able to do that. And I think as you look to your colleagues and when you're at either a firm or working in the industry, figuring out how you can play to each other's strengths and empowering each other. Remembering your roots. I will think back many times of where I came from, growing up on a dairy farm, hauling manure on weekends, not the most glamorous job, but certainly knowing that I came from a small town and going back to that small town and being able to embrace and give back to the community. I think that's really important. So always remembering where you came from and those that have uplifted you from your communities. And going into that, fostering community. That's what we've tried to build at the department, is a community. And I will always say that. I don't say that I have staff. I say that we have a team at the department and a community of people that truly care about helping farmers and food system members. And I think that's incredibly important, is to always build community wherever you go. And as I said earlier, I consider my role a privilege. And when you are in a leadership position, it truly is a privilege to be able to make decisions in alignment with those around you that benefit those around you. And I always will continue to remind myself that on a daily basis, that I feel very fortunate to be in my role and the privilege that I've been provided to be in this role as the first female commissioner. And with that, I would thank you all, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fabulous. Loved hearing from you. And we do have some time for questions. So if anyone come with a microphone, raise your hand, and I'll come to you if you have a question for Ashley. Oh, there's one there.
Awesome. I can get us kicked off. Hi, it's good to see you. I'm Avani. I'm a junior at Harvard College, but originally from Central Illinois. Big 4-H'er through and through, so it's exciting to see you here. I'm curious, as a young person interested in agriculture and food policy and food insecurity and addressing it across the country, especially when we see the ag sector traditionally skew much older. I think the average age of a farmer is in the mid-60s now. How do you see your role, or how can we as young people encourage other young people to get excited about agriculture, considering the impact it has on society in general?
That's a great question. And as you may have seen on one of the slides, this year we really wanted to focus on youth and agriculture. So we declared 2025 to be the year of youth and agriculture. And we brought in organizations, not only farms and commodity organizations, but schools, to be able to do ag literacy events and to go into schools and read to students. And so throughout the month of October, we're in schools across the state engaging with students and really making sure that that awareness piece and the excitement about agriculture is there. We also last year launched our first ever Agricultural Youth Council, which is comprised of high school juniors and seniors, many from non-traditional ag backgrounds, but interested in learning more about state government, food, ag policy, as well as ways that they can get involved in the industry. And many have an interest in food security work. So I think building out those opportunities with those around you, whether it's a club or whether it's going to events and sharing your story, I think that's critically important.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Madison. I'm a 3L evening student at Temple down in Philadelphia. You talk about access and markets and what farmers can do with their produce. And you also, I really appreciated your service piece as a hospitality person myself. Are there conversations on how to partner with restaurants, thinking about how to support other small businesses because restaurants also have a high fail rate, so being able to have a local source and adding to the economy that way?
Great question. So for some of our farms, just based on scale, they're not at that level. But what we see is we have shared use kitchens who are now taking crops and aggregating them from several farms to make value-added products for both restaurants as well as for the schools. So many of the universities, especially in the Boston area, are now working with this shared use kitchen who has the capacity to create the products, and they're serving as the aggregator for farms. So Commonwealth Kitchen in Dorchester, great entity and organization working with farmers across the state. And that's one way we've been able to get more of the farm products into restaurants. And I should also note, we work with the aquaculture sector in the state, and that's actually our fastest growing sector. So many of the oysters and scallops that you see are going into the restaurants directly from Massachusetts.
Hello, my name is Keith Goff. I am a 2L, also a 4-H'er, and small farmer growing up. Going back to the first question, with our aging aging farmer population, and trying to get the youth more involved in it. I understand getting involved from this side because I switched over. But what are we doing, or like what is being done to maybe try to preserve those small farms, or preserve those farms? Because after those farmers aren't farming, I feel like industry is just kind of gonna gobble up that space.
Fair question. And something that we, as I said, we've been concerned with the loss of land to development at the state level, knowing that it's a very attractive offer when a developer comes along or a solar company if the land isn't protected. So we actually have a business planning course that ties into a succession planning course. We just launched that last year. It's called Farm Pass. And for farms that don't have an identified successor, we're working with other entities. We're working with Farm Credit East and those to be able to help identify a successor for those farms. The average age in Massachusetts is 58, and we continue to see that number rise. So we're very mindful of succession planning and what happens if there isn't a successor identified.
Hello, thank you very much for your speech. Very wonderful. I am Uche Ofodile. I'm a professor of law at University of Arkansas. I'm also a member of the UN Working Group on the Rights of Peasants. It's a working group that was set up a year ago that focuses just on peasants, and which includes farmers and pastoralists and fisher folks. So my question really is in two-part. One, right to food. Maine made a constitutional amendment incorporating the right to food, but I don't see that spreading to other states. And yet the rights framework brings something to the table that other frameworks do not. So are there efforts in Massachusetts to incorporate right to food into the framework, and what would be the pushback to such effort? The second question is really about farmers' rights. The smallholder farmers. Are there measures to incorporate the rights of peasants, the rights of farmers, fisher folks, into the laws here? Thank you so much.
Thank you for the questions. So to your first question, at the legislative level, there has not been a movement in Massachusetts at this point to make food a constitutional right. It is incorporated in much of our legislation. I think there's 6,000 or 7,000 bills that are filed every session. And for the first time, we actually have an omnibus farm bill that's been filed in Massachusetts because all of the issues around food and agriculture have really come to light of the attention of our legislature. We have 7 million residents in Massachusetts, so 7 million consumers, as we say. And for our legislature, we're really excited that they're now looking at food as a top priority and agriculture. So we don't have that yet in our Constitution, but there is a greater awareness and advocacy for the local food system. To your second point, or second question around looking at small farms and the rights, many of our farms, so the average size of our farms in the state is 60 acres. So compared to the Midwest or the South, very small farms, very diversified. Many of the farms are growing 30 to 40 different types of crops on their farms. So many of the farms we consider, the majority, to be small farms, and we work very closely with both migrant organizations as well as worker organizations to make sure that the whole farming community feels heard and represented in the space.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley. This has been great.
Thank you.